Welcome to the Rent to Rent Success podcast, all about creating consistent cash flow, escaping the 9-to-5, and really living life on your terms. This is the only podcast entirely dedicated to helping you achieve rent to rent success. It's our place to inspire each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. I'm Stephanie Taylor, your guide on this exciting ride. Let's start up the engines and get ready to fly. Hello, hello, hello. I hope you're having an amazing day today. It's Stephanie here. Welcome aboard episode 42 of the Rent to Rent Success podcast. You'll love this episode because it's answering a question that really stops people from getting started. If a letting agent can't make a property work, how can I? So before we dive in, I would just like to remind you, as if you could possibly have forgotten, our book is launching very soon. So if you're listening to this episode just as it's being released, we are pre-launch and we have got some incredible offers which are only going to be available to the VIP pre-launch book list. And they're going to be some amazing offers. So make sure that you sign up at rent2rentbook.com. That's rent2rentbook.com to make sure you don't miss out. And we'll have the link in the show notes as well. Let's get into today. So perhaps you can see that a landlord or letting agent might entrust you with a property, but how could you make it worth more money so that you can pay a fair rent to the landlords and charge a fair rent to your housemates? In episode 2 of this podcast, we talked about the 3 ways to do rent to rent. And you'll remember I talked about HMO, service accommodation, and single lets. HMO is the one with the highest return on money and time invested, especially for beginners. And it's easy to see how you can make more money when the property is being rented as a single let, and then you're going to rent it out by the room. So maybe it was at £900 as a whole property, and then you're going to rent it out for £500 per room as a 5-bed HMO, which is £2,500. Although you take the bills off. But most people can easily see that you'd make more money from letting a single let out by the room. But you also remember that I've suggested that you use properties which are existing HMOs. So when the property is already an HMO, you'd assume that the owner or letting agent is already used to those higher rents, and therefore it wouldn't work for rent to rent. And this isn't always the case. I would say often it isn't the case. The way that we are able to achieve high rents is by our HMO systems, which many landlords and agents are just unaware of or they don't implement. So we complete a light refurbishment of the property and we dress the rooms attractively and we provide good service. And it's the last one that provides a lot of the uplift. We're really proactive on spare room, for example. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to rent a property from a letting agent. They're not always the most responsive. Oftentimes they're not good at arranging the viewings and so on. And so when you can be responsive, you can stand head and shoulders above a lot of the competition. So let me give you an example to bring this to life of how a landlord may already have an HMO, but would make a lot more money working with you as a rent-to-renter than previously working with a traditional letting agent. So the property that I'm going to talk about is an 8-bed HMO, and the owner was losing at least £800 every single month, and often it was over £1,000 a month. This was after he'd paid his mortgage, after he'd paid all the bills. The rents just did not cover the running costs of this property. Reason why, his property only had 3 tenants out of 8, and they were all paying very low rents. In fact, he told us that the most tenants he'd ever had in the property was 5. It was just crazy. And the heating, oh my gosh, I still remember it walking through that door as it was yesterday. The heating was set to what I've labeled after this viewing tropical 24/7. That was the heating setting that was on in that house. A wall of heat hit you as soon as you opened the front door. It was stale, sweaty air. Air was almost thick. It was as though you had to sort of claw your way through it with your hands. The air was almost thick. It was so hot. And you're perhaps wondering how anyone would find themselves in this position of losing so much money every month and this carrying on for some time. In Actually, what was happening is that he was paying for people to live in his property. And we all know that's not how property investment is supposed to work. And that landlord is a lovely man with a young family and other businesses. He lives over an hour away. He initially self managed and then he passed it to a letting agent. And over time, the property went downhill to such an extent that no one knew would move in and he was losing more and more money. Eventually, he stopped using the letting agent as they just weren't helping and it was another cost. He said later that he didn't realize until after we'd started managing it how much stress it was causing in his life, as you can imagine. And of course, he would have sold it if he felt that he could. But having bought at the height of the market, selling would have left him owing tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds to the bank. So he hung on in there, losing over 800 or between at least £800 a month and often over £1,000 a month. And then he got our letter through the post about rent to rent and guaranteed rent. And after his experiences with letting agents before, he was a bit skeptical, but he decided to give it a try. And it was with this same exact property, which was previously losing him over £800 every month. We turned it into a property which now makes over £1,000 a month for him, that we pay him in guaranteed rent for doing nothing. And we also make over £1,000 a month for our business as well. And that's what I mean by the win-win-win. And that's what I mean by adding value. We're not taking anything away. We are taking a property which was doing badly, turning it around, managing it exceptionally, and then being able to provide a win for the landlord. He said afterwards that he just felt like a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He invited all his family around to see it because they just couldn't believe how good it looked. And it irks me when people say we're taking away, when we're adding. We're creating something that's a win for everyone. And that is how I love doing life. I love doing business that way. And not every case is as extreme as that. But often and usually there's a way that we can add value in a different way and provide more value to the owners of the property, to the housemates, and to ourselves. But in almost every single case, having an HMO system like the rent to rent success system that we teach in our rent to rent Kickstarter program will enable you to take any HMO property that meets the criteria we set out and make it more valuable. And when you make it more valuable, it's better for housemates, it's better for landlords, it's better for you. And you can do this too, simply. If you want to find out more about getting started in rent to rent, you can sign up for our free rent to rent success guide and masterclass. It's at renttorentssuccess.com/guide. And you can find there, you've got the written guide and you've also got the masterclass, which you can watch straight away. So I hope you enjoyed that one. If you've got any questions that you would love me to answer, I'd love to answer them. Just send me a message at Stephanie T Property on Insta and let me know what your question is. I'd love to answer it. Until next week, have a great rest of the week. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer. I will see you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like the links for anything mentioned in today's episode, or if voice is not enough and you want to see us on video too, you can find all the show notes and lots more at renttorentssuccess.com. That's rent number 2, rentsuccess.com. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we'd super appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to review it in your podcast app. Remember, we'll be donating to our B1G1 charities too for each review you give. Until then, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer.